Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone asked you, not how are you doing, but how are you thriving? We have a pretty clear shared picture of what struggling looks like. Burnout, anxiety, disconnection. We can name those. We talk about those. But thriving? Most people, when I ask them what a genuinely good life looks like for them specifically, go quiet. They can tell me what they don't want. They can list what they're trying to escape. But a positive, detailed, personal vision of thriving? That part is surprisingly blurry. And I think that matters, because you can't move towards something you haven't defined. So today, that's what we're going to do, together. We're going to look at what the research actually says about human flourishing, challenge some of the cultural noise around what a good life is supposed to look like, and then I'll give you a real framework to build your own personal vision of thriving. Not mine, yours. Let's get into it. Part 1. The problem with fine. Most people are living in what researchers call the middle zone. Not depressed, not thriving, just fine. Managing, getting through the week. Psychologist Corey Keyes has a name for this. He calls it languishing. And what's striking about his work is that languishing isn't the absence of mental illness. You can be completely free of any clinical diagnosis and still feel hollow, flat, like you're going through motions without momentum. The pandemic put this on the map for a lot of people. Suddenly, millions of us were sitting with the question, wait, is this it? Is this what I was building toward? And the honest answer for a lot of people was, I don't actually know what I was building toward. That's not a character flaw. That's what happens when we spend years optimizing for productivity, achievement, external milestones, without ever stepping back to ask what we actually want our inner life to feel like, what we want our days to feel like, what we want our relationships to feel like. So before we can talk about thriving, we have to acknowledge, most of us were never taught how to think about it clearly. Part 2. What the research actually says. So what does the science say thriving looks like? There are a few frameworks worth knowing. The first is Martin Seligman's PERMA model, one of the most widely cited models in positive psychology. He identifies 5 elements of well-being: positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. The key insight here is that none of these alone is enough. A life built entirely on accomplishment without meaning or relationship isn't thriving. It's just a resume. Then there's the work coming out of the blue zones, the regions of the world where people consistently live past 100 in good health. Researcher Dan Buettner identified patterns. They move naturally throughout the day. They eat with purpose. They belong to faith or community structures. They have a clear sense of why they get up in the morning. The Japanese call it Ikigai, your reason for being. The Nicoyans of Costa Rica call it plan de vida, a life plan. What's striking is that none of these long-lived, thriving people were optimizing in the way we typically think about optimization. They weren't doing 5 a.m. cold plunges or tracking their HRV. They were embedded in meaning, community, and rhythm. And finally, there's self-determination theory from psychologists Deci and Ryan, which argues that 3 core psychological needs drive human flourishing: autonomy, feeling like your life reflects your actual choices; competence, feeling capable and growing; and relatedness, feeling genuinely connected to others. What all of these frameworks have in common is this: thriving is multidimensional. It's not one thing you nail. It's a constellation of conditions that you tend to, together. Part 3. The cultural noise. Here's where I want to push back on something, because I think there's a lot of cultural noise around this topic that actually makes it harder to find your own answer. We live in a world that tells us thriving looks like a highlight reel. Peak performance, optimized sleep, six-figure income, visible success. The aesthetic of wellness, the matcha latte, the sunrise workout, the journaling spread. And look, some of that stuff is genuinely useful. We talk about a lot of it on this channel. But there's a difference between tools for well-being and performing well-being. And a lot of what gets sold as thriving is actually just a more sophisticated form of striving, a new finish line to chase, a new version of "I'll feel good when I." True thriving tends to be quieter than that. It's more likely to look like a Tuesday afternoon where you feel genuinely present, a conversation that leaves you feeling more like yourself, work that you do even if no one was watching, a body that feels like home rather than a project. It's also worth noting that thriving looks different across cultures, across life stages, across individual temperaments. An introvert's version of a thriving social life looks nothing like an extrovert's. A parent of young children thrives differently than someone in their 60s with an empty nest. Which is why you can't just borrow someone else's vision of it. You have to locate your own. Part 4. Building your personal vision. Practical, grounded. This is the section viewers will screenshot or rewatch. So how do you actually do that? Here's a framework I find genuinely useful. I call it the 5 domains check-in, and it maps closely onto what the research supports. Domain 1, body. When your body is thriving, it feels like resource, not burden. You have energy for the things that matter. You're not fighting your physical self. Ask yourself, in an average week, does my body feel like an ally or an obstacle? Domain 2, mind. Mental thriving isn't the absence of hard thoughts. It's having a relationship with your thoughts where they do not rule you. You have focus when you need it. You can be bored without panic. Again, ask yourself, is my mind generally working with me? Domain 3, emotions. Emotional thriving means having the full range available, not just positivity. You can feel grief, anger, joy, and stillness. You're not numbed out or overwhelmed. Question yourself, do I have access to my emotional life, or am I cut off from it? Domain 4, relationships. Thriving here means having at least a few relationships where you're fully known and still accepted, where you can be honest, where there's genuine reciprocity. Ask yourself again, do I have people in my life I could call at 2 a.m.? Domain 5, purpose. This doesn't have to be a grand calling. It can be as simple as contributing to something beyond yourself. A family, a craft, a community. Finally, ask yourself, does my life have a direction that feels like mine? Now here's the exercise I'd invite you to do, and I genuinely encourage you to pause this video and actually do it, not just file it away. Sit with each of those 5 domains and give it an honest score out of 10. Not where you want to be, where you actually are. Then look at the lowest score and ask, what is one thing that, if I changed it this week, would move that needle even slightly? Not a life overhaul, one thing. Thriving is built in small, repeated, intentional movements. That's the whole thesis of this channel. I want to leave you with one last thought. There's a philosopher named Aristotle who used the word eudaimonia to describe the highest form of human flourishing. It's often translated as happiness, but that's not quite right. A better translation is something like living in full accordance with your nature and your potential. A life that is genuinely, authentically, actively yours. Not a life that looks good from the outside. A life that feels true from the inside. That's what this channel is ultimately about. not hacks, not shortcuts, not someone else's version of optimal, but helping you build the conditions, physical, mental, emotional, holistic, for your own version of a genuinely good life. So, what does thriving actually look like for you? I'd love to hear it in the comments. Seriously, not a generic answer, a specific one. Where in your life, right now, do you most want to grow? And if this video landed for you, share it with someone who's in that middle zone, who's fine but knows they're capable of more. Sometimes just having the language for something is the first step. I'll see you in the next one.